This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Friends, today we have a great episode and it's sponsored by the Herzog Foundation. We're welcoming Walter Clarke, and he's going to be talking to us about how to bring financial literacy to our kids. And Walter is a financial expert and educator and the founder of Family CFO and the author of this book, 401 Kid. We're so delighted to have you on, Walter.
Oh, thank you. It's always amazing, and I'm always honored to talk about this subject.
Well, I noticed that you talk about the basic choice that we have to either trade our time for money and get wages and probably never acquire wealth. You said 98% of the people who come to your financial seminars did not become wealthy that way. Or what? What's the alternative to trading our time for money? And how do we explain that to kids?
Well, I mean, I think you can explain it in the concept of a team. You know, a baseball team, a basketball team. There's all different functions that allows the whole to be better. And so that's a business. You know, a one-for-one relationship, which is the wage earner. So it's one-to-one, and then on the business side, it's one-to-many. So it's really just starting the conversation so they know that that's available to them. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like, and how do they do that, and exposing them to the different ways that people create money and own something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it where you said talk to them about just their phone and ask them who made their phone, and what are some other questions to introduce to them the idea of a company, of an entity that makes money that maybe they could invest in someday.
It's what's first, the chicken or the egg? So there's really two components to my work. One is we got to start a lot earlier. And number two, we really got to introduce the concept of a business. So those two things I'm super passionate about that. But what do you introduce early? You introduce money is a byproduct of something. You get money by doing something. Mm-hmm. By creating value, by learning something, by developing a skill. We call it learn, try, fail. And the way that you elevate, whether it's a basketball skill, whether it's a baseball skill, whether it's a reading skill, whatever it is. And so the more the kids understand that there's a learning journey in their life, and the more they're good at something, the more they're going to get paid. And you could just take them on a journey and look at the landscaper and look at the doctor and look at the architect and look at different people. Look at you go inside of a Walmart. What is Walmart? That was an idea that somebody had to sell things for less. So it's really not so much the right conversation. It's having the conversation. Doing it in a way that makes sense for you, doing it in a way that makes sense for the kid, and what is a business owner. And you could talk about somebody like Elon Musk and what he's creating, and he couldn't do it all himself. He needs lots of people to help him build Teslas and build rockets, and so that's the dynamic of we. And when it comes to wealth creation, I taught a class for a lot of years whereby people came into sudden wealth, and 100% of the time they were business owners. Uh-huh. They had equity in something. They weren't necessarily the founder. But what they did is when they went to work somewhere, they got a salary, and then they got equity compensation.
Yeah, you definitely emphasize the orientation to entrepreneurship and the sense of ownership in managing money. And you talk about starting out with little kids, just that's probably the hardest for parents to do, is to know how to talk to kids about something that's really kind of abstract. I liked how you described it, was talk about money before they have money, and talk about money as you would with just nutrition, hygiene. Of course, you talk to your kids about these things, including money, because money is important. And you need to talk to your children about every topic that's important that could go terribly wrong if you don't instruct them. And yet, people don't talk to their kids about money very much. Why is that?
Well, they don't know how to. So I was with somebody recently, and they taught. He spoke English, and the wife spoke Mandarin, and the kids were bilingual. And he goes, "I'm really frustrated at the money conversation because I um, I talked to him about compound interest, and he didn't understand it." And I said, "Well, first of all, don't stop talking about compound interest because he understands a lot more than you think he does." So when he was learning Mandarin, did he get it right away? And he's like, "Well, no." So what I'm doing is I'm building some tools for parents early on. So I have this thing that's coming out fairly soon called the Learning Board. And the Learning Board is just a visual sense of here's all the things that I've accomplished, here's all the things that I've done, and this is how I've elevated myself. It gives kids the ability to see progress. There's a really good book called um, The Gap and the Gain. So where have I come from? And then from there, you got to introduce these four critical elements, which are save, spend, give, and invest. Because if you don't introduce delayed gratification early on, the consumer bug is going to hit our kids really, really early. And that's going to have a massive influence. I don't care how much money you make. If you don't know how to regulate finance, then there's no investing conversation that we're going to have because there's never any left over. But if you can regulate it, so I'm building these dolls, and so I have them. I have them in design right now, um, and so they're going to be made, and they're a spender, saver, investor, giver. And so mom would be like, "Hey, who are you today? Why is it important to be a giver? Why is it important to be an investor? The investor plants a garden. Why do you plant a garden? Well, a garden is a seed that grows that then generates return, which is food, without you having to do anything. And then you can, say things like, imagine I ask you to clean your room, and you have your brother do it for you. Well, and the reason that you have your brother doing it because you invested. And you have invested and you have enough to pay your brother to do something that you don't want to do. So kids are brilliant. I have a quiz in the back of my book along with lessons, and then I'm also writing stories of different people that had struggled and made it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the combination of those things, and to a certain degree, I think parents are lazy.
Yeah, I think that can be a problem. I
You
think,
know, and
don't you think also that some parents are reticent about it, either because they don't want their kids to go blabbing to everyone else about, Daddy says we're millionaires, or Daddy says we have, lots of credit card debt. What's credit card debt? Or they don't feel like they have a story of success to tell their child. They feel like their story isn't complete, and they're maybe not confident about how they've handled their money.
well, I mean, that's the best story to tell your kids, to be vulnerable and say, these are the mistakes I made.
Mm-hmm.
So the question we always ask parents is, do you want your kid to be the same as you economically, less than you, or do you want them to blow by you?
Definitely
So
blow bias.
yeah, so when you have that conversation, you say, listen, I made some bad choices. Here's what I did, but I'm going to train you not to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to avoid some of the mistakes that I make, and we're going to set you up for economic success. And here's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to get it. They're going to be like, I don't have the economic choices that maybe some of your friends that live across town do because their dad was a business owner or sacrificed early on or invested early. And, I was a spender. And, we just got to get really vulnerable with our kids about what worked, what didn't work. And that's the key to all this. Because then what happens is you build a bonding experience with your son or daughter.
Mm.
Richard Williams, he didn't know how to play tennis.
He just figured out how to instruct his girls.
He just read. He read. He became a student of the game,
Hmm.
and he dedicated himself, and then he knew where to go.
Hmm.
Anybody can do that. Anybody can train, mentor their kids to be better.
Um, I liked what you said about these dolls you have in production because your book talks about Penny the saver, Gina the giver, Sam the spender, and Izzy the investor, and how they each would, were talking about how they would handle money that they got hold of, and I thought that was so helpful for an elementary age kid
Yeah.
to just personify these different roles that we have with money, and um, I think you must be really gifted at bringing these abstract concepts down to a concrete level for youngsters.
Well, I have a lot of experience teaching super smart adults that have a lot of money and in a way that teaches to them like they're in third grade. Because what happens is if you create wealth in another area, you're not financial acumen is not your first language. So how do you teach to somebody that's never learned it before?
Hmm. Yeah. I guess you didn't talk that much about allowance or how the money that maybe a child develops skills with gets into their hands. But I wanted to talk to you about a couple of the ways that I was raised. I wasn't given an allowance. My sister and I were told, your job is to make A's. And if you do well enough in school, you'll get a scholarship. And we did. So, we saved our parents back then like $40,000 for the efforts that we made. But they didn't want us to get a little job in high school and go sell ice cream at the ice cream shop. I'm what that did to me was make me a very persuasive young lady because every bit of money that I got from them, I had to persuade them that, you know, I needed it. That was a legitimate purchase. Do you think that's, is that a healthy way to raise kids? Because I really wasn't handling money and certainly wasn't investing.
Well, I mean, I would have preferred if they would have given you some element to earn.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked that, and then you have a dollar in your hand, and you're going to always have a want.
Mm-hmm.
And so then how do you learn to say no to yourself? So
Mm-hmm.
I would have rather that, but I think tying like your job is to get good grades and get a scholarship, and I think that's along the same path. It's really just the economics of how the world works.
Mm-hmm. Seems to me that the way we raise our kids could give them a variety of ways that we see the source of money. So if you're on public assistance while you're raising your kids all your life and you don't seek any other source of income, they're going to see the government as the source of money. Um, if you have some kind of extremely faith-based missionary family, you might see God as the source of money. If you uh, are into gambling, you see chance as your source of money. Um, but it seems like what you're advocating is that we get kids to see themselves as the source of money, their um, gifts and skills and discipline and ability to meet the needs of others is the source of money. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, but we got to be careful here because at the end of the day, money happens as a result of something that you do. And so there's really two roads you go down. One is the pursuit of money. You have to be really, really careful of that because you can pursue money and get money and it'll never generate what it is that you're looking for. So if you think money's going to make you happy because of power, prestige, and possessions and all these things, it just never does. There's never enough of that can fill up your internal hole. However, if you become a creator and you're into impact and contribution and service, biblically, you're going to make a lot of money.
We want to take a moment to thank the Herzog Foundation and its growing media network, home to the Conversation Balloons podcast and other incredible faith-focused shows. The foundation is dedicated to strengthening Christian education, helping families, teachers, and entire school communities pass on faith and wisdom from one generation to the next. They do this through free training events, support for new and growing schools, and a media network. Learn more about how the Herzog Foundation is investing in the next generation at herzogfoundation.com.
Probably the most influential guy ever came to my class. So, young guy, 30 years old. And he came to my class. He had a lot of money, and he's like, "I'm employee number 20 at Google." And basically, I said, "Why'd you go to work? Why'd you leave Intel and go to work for Google?" And he said, "Because they were doing something really cool." He was mission driven. He said it was never about the money. And so, when you're mission driven and it's not about the money comes as a result of your contribution and your impact. And that's really what we need to teach kids, not the pursuit of money. It's like if you were to give somebody a trophy and they never ran the marathon and you said, here's the trophy. That's why when parents give their kids money without effort, that fails. And so by learning all of the trials and the tribulations and the challenges and failures and setbacks and everything that goes with the journey, that's what develops you as a person. I mean, think about what makes us happy and where we get our self-esteem from. It's from internal accomplishment. It's growing internally. It's not somebody handing us a car, a jewelry, a watch. It's just not. Mm-hmm. So we got to be really, really careful because, again, I've been in the game of teaching people to come into money, and I've met some of the most miserable people on the planet that are loaded. Mm-hmm. They're empty. They're empty souls. Mm-hmm. They don't contribute. They're not of service. It's all about them. They're narcissists. Their families have no unity. You can see it. Just there's a diagram of them.
And surely you can, to some extent, identify character traits that are not there that would make them happier and give meaning to their lives, I'm sure. Let me talk with you about character. You talk a lot about that in 401 Kid. You said that training kids in wise handling of money helps them delay gratification. It certainly cultivates their ability to plan. And there are many others, but one that it hit me, and as a lawyer, I was really impressed with this, that it instills a sense of fairness in them. And I really was intrigued with that. But, we can't participate long in business and treat people unfairly, whether it's employees or just customers in a retail setting. Another thing that I think it does for kids is cultivates their connection to objective reality. Money is not magic. It doesn't come from, fairy dust and ideas and being told that you can be all that you follow your heart and all these Disney things. It's objectively real and it measures outcomes. It is a measure of outcome. Mm-hmm. And there's, I think, a lot of trend in education that leads kids away from objective reality. And you also say it develops perseverance, patience, consistency, and wonderful, wonderful things like that. And I think parents who may not have a lot of financial literacy themselves if they do teach their kids these character traits, the kids will be more likely to be prosperous, seems to me, because they'll at least close the back door. In other words, they won't make ridiculous financial decisions like gambling, um, conspicuous consumption, things like that.
Well, they'll look at money different. Money will mean something different to them.
Yeah. Do you think our schools, most of the schools that you go into to do financial education for kids, are they doing an adequate job? Just as making financial literacy part of a curriculum.
Well, I think we're doing a much better job. I mean, I don't know, there's 38 states, 35 states. I'm actually helping the state of Arizona try to get financial literacy here with current Treasurer Yee to do that. That's been a battle. But there's a lot of outside resources that parents can rely on. My premise that really just doesn't exist is I look at this window of 0 to 10. We're literally doing nothing in the 0 to 10 timeframe. And I'm really dedicated to creating tools that parents can have some plug and play, where it's a kid's book, it's the characters, it's the learning board, it's a few things that they can read to their kid, and they can have that conversation, and then it can start at the dinner table. And then as they make money through however they do it, then it's delayed gratification. And so there's so many things that one of the, it's a little bit of an off track, but it's really important to kind of talk about it here, is the two most important things that parents can do for their kids about money is not money. It's to be connected to them emotionally, and it is to be an advocate for them in terms of a supportive person in their endeavors. You do those two things, and your kids begin to develop self-esteem, and they begin to go down this path. If you are critical and you're not connected, your kids will find something else to be connected to. And you won't be able to have this conversation with them. The internet will have this conversation. So when we think about it, one of the challenges is when you think about money, and I've done a couple of programs at UCLA, and people are like, hey, we want to talk about money. Teach us about investing. I'm like, man, we got to learn about the kid. We got to learn about the attributes of little Johnny from 0 to 5 and how we really make him a dynamic kid. Because if we do that, then he becomes a learning machine. He becomes a world changer, and money just comes. But if we focus on the money and we break down in some of these other areas, there's a lot of absentee parents today. A lot of them.
So yeah, connectedness will impact their ability to have agency in their financial future. I liked your suggestion. You had several suggestions toward the end about not just the parent having the good conversations, but resourcing them with people outside your family, like a mentor, like the stories of risk-taking, failure, success. And one was take a money trip, let kids see where money is being made and where companies are actually functioning. And we had a commodities trading floor in Tulsa for a while, and my husband took some students to that just to see what that was, and you suggest opening a custodial brokerage account for your kids so that they can track it. I like the fact that you notice that tracking anything, like in sports, tracking your progress, helps kids become more responsible, avoid procrastinating, and just keeps them reality based. And Junior Achievement, BizTown, some of these programs that get them involved in financial literacy are great resources. Are there some other ones that come to mind that you can recommend to parents?
I'm obviously a big, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, Sharon Lechter. Sharon's a friend of mine. Sharon has a lot of things that are out there. I'm avidly buying all kinds of financial books. I'm just finishing up a program from Scott Donnell. He has what he calls the mentor family. So Scott doesn't lead with money. Scott leads with how to create dynamic, world-changing kids first, and then the money will come. Scott's really smart. So there's a lot of things. I think, you just gotta, it's like any kind of skill. It's you got to understand what investing is, how it works. There's equity, there's debt, why they exist, what do they do, real estate. It's amazing. You can have a 3-year-old that fluently speaks Mandarin. Why? Because they taught their kid the language. So I think that we have to be very consistent as parents, not only in terms of money, but in terms of what we want to create. How do we function with money? Do we spend every nickel we make? That's why the dolls are so critical, because you're just playing with the spender. Like you have orphaned the investor, the giver, and the saver.
Uh-huh.
Is that the kind of parent you are? And so we just need to recognize, like you wouldn't go to the ice cream shop and say, okay, we're not going to have dinner tonight. We're just going to eat ice cream. That'd be foolish.
Mm-hmm.
So balance, and there's a lot of things we can say, our kids, but for us, it's when it's not working, we still got to do it. Like you wouldn't stop talking to your kids if they didn't learn by 1.5, would you?
No, absolutely not.
Right. You would say, well, we tried. My kids ain't speaking.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
It's same thing with money. I met a really, really dynamic family as I was writing this book, and he just, man, he said the most simple, most powerful thing. He said, talk to them about money when they don't have money. Talk to them about sex when they're not interested in sex. Talk to them about social media when they could care less about social media, and establish the framework and the values of the family.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Well, tell people how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your work.
So, 401k, 401 Kid is, you can buy the book. There's also Lessons from the Magic Penny that is launching. The first book is out, called Dad, Why Do You Have to Go to Work? And then a second book will be out soon, and it's Hi, My Name is Sarah. And it's the life story of Sarah Blakely, who was the founder of Spanx, and all of her failures and trials and tribulations. And then the second book is Hi, My Name's Jesse, and it's her husband. And so they're very iconic people, but they do it differently. They don't chase money. They chase relationships and service and contribution. And I want to storyboard money and life for kids in a way that shows them possibility, not just a bling. I'm around, I have some friends that are agents, and I'm around NBA athletes and agents, and, a lot of bling. And so it's hard to keep your feet on the ground.
I'm sure it is. I wouldn't know, but I'm sure it is. Well, thank you for all you do for all kinds of families. And we wish you well in all your endeavors and with your new book. And I hope that we can continue to put our listeners in touch with what you're doing. You have a website?
Yeah, I do. It's Walter Clarke with an E.com. So it's just my name spelled out, and all of our resources and everything are there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.